Women are often regarded as the inferior sex by their gods, religions, and consequently their own societies. Why is it that these ancient dogmas have targeted women? Why are women still following these systems that take away their rights, their equality, and not only make them the subjects of their husbands, but levy incredibly harsh double standards upon them? In Judaism and Christianity, do we hear stories of men being stoned to death for not being virgins at marriage or being sold into marriage by their fathers? We don't. Under Islamic Sharia law, are men confined to the house unless they have a female escort? Do they have to cover their entire bodies to avert the covetous eyes of another sex? We don't hear about that. Since the days of Adam and Eve, women have been the scapegoat of patriarchal societies and have been repressed because of someone's God and the fact that someone's God says so. Why is this still happening? Debates are ongoing about how, why, and where gender roles began, but one thing is for certain, the treatment of women by religion is flat out wrong. Do you disagree? Well, then give us a call and tell us why, because the show is starting now. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Talk Heathen. It is May 5th, 2024. I am your host, Sydney Davis Jr., and I am joined by my co-host, Christy Powell. Christy, how are you doing this morning?
Hey, howdy, hey. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be doing my first show here with the ACA with you. I think that we're going to have a good time today.
I think so too. I'm really excited. Thanks for joining us, or me, I guess. I'm joining you, you're joining me. So for anybody tuning in, watching, listening, Talk Heathen is a product of Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Talk Heathen is also a live call-in show, and we have open lines. So get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/call. So if you're watching and you're like, no, I disagree with everything you've said so far, give us a call and tell us why. If you agree, post in the chat. Tell us why. Give us a call. So we're down to the question of the week. Every week we have a question of the week. And first, let's see here. It's time for our Talk Heathen to Me segment where we get into last week's question, which was complete the sentence. The worst part about going to church is blank. And here are the top 3 answers. Number 3, from Think-A-Toes. The worst part about going to church is the social pressure to partake in ritualistic cannibalism. Yes, 100%. I remember back when I was a Cannibal Baptist, those were not fun days. Absolutely not. Number 2 is Douglas Harder. The worst part about going to church is everyone watching to see what you put in the offering plate. Yes.
Been there.
Yes.
Feel that.
Yes, especially if it wasn't the best cuts of human meat. You would get judged very harshly. And then number 1, the winning comment from last week is from Josh the Heretic. The worst part about going to church is it's either a wedding or a funeral. Either way, I've probably lost a friend. Wow.
Womp, womp.
Wow. Oh, man, that reminds me of those Reddit threads that are like, what were the signs that a marriage wasn't going to last when you were at the wedding? I love reading those answers because there's just so many. There's so many different scenarios.
There's so much schadenfreude there. I'm going to have to Google that later.
Yes. And there's always a new one every week, too. It's like somebody just realizes they want to ask that question every week, and it's always new answers. So the prompt for next week is create your own God paradox. So create your own God paradox. Friends in the chat, post them. I was going to say call in with them, but we'll get to those next week. Now, Christy, what's your response to create your own God paradox?
I want to know if a truly omnipotent, a truly all-powerful God who can do anything is capable of creating a holy book so perfect, so inerrant, that of the billions of people on the planet, no 2 of them are able to agree on how to interpret it.
That is a great God paradox, I would say.
That seems to have been the goal so far. I think we could argue that maybe there are a lot of gods capable of making that happen.
True. Absolutely, 100%. I think when it comes to creating your own God paradox, I don't think we have to create many of them. I think a lot of them just kind of exist, wouldn't you
Yeah,
say?
yeah. So
Like they
maybe
just
this one was more just found in the wild. It wasn't necessarily, I shouldn't take full credit for the creative ideas here.
Yeah, because I was trying to think what my answer would be, and I can't think of anything that isn't like part of the
Isn't
Bible
already a
or
problem? Yeah.
right, exactly. Yes, all friends watching, please post in the chat, create your own God paradox, and you might be one of the top 3 for next week.
Let's hear them.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hear them. Let's see them. Let's read them. Now we're going to go to the crew cam. We got a crew here. And I just want to thank everybody who's a part of this production.
All these folks that make it come together. So many people not even pictured here. We're very, very thankful for all of y'all's hard work.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right. So, first call. Do we have a first call in the queue?
No. Let's take a little bit of time and maybe look at some of the screenshots that we've had coming in. I know that we have kind of started to talk about sexism and women's role in religion, wherever we want to put that. And Lord knows, Sydney, when somebody who looks like you and someone who looks like me go out on YouTube, we get some feedback.
Yes.
Let's take a moment to share some of that.
Yes.
Yeah, where do you want to go first?
Let's see. Surprise me.
Yeah, so I love this one. Number 2, if we can. The number 2 screenshot, if we can pull that up.
The New Testament isn't moral. Disqualified himself from the beginning.
Yeah, I love that notion that just because I would think that maybe parts of the New Testament maybe have some question marks, nothing that I say from there has anything good to go with it.
Oh boy, I see one that I don't know. Are we allowed to do number 1? Because it's
let's hit it. Let's hit it. Let's find out.
Number 1. Yes. So this one actually, I saw this one before, like just on the video, and it confused me. And it took me way too long to figure out what they were talking about. So I almost feel like they got me with this one. But it says, I can picture her having an orgasm. Oh, nothing. Oh, nothing. Oh, my nothing. Ha 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 ha.
Is that your O face? Is that how you sound when you're having sex? 100%. I don't mean to get too personal here, but what the hell? What does that even mean?
Well, honestly, the thing that offended me the most was how long it took me to get it. That's what offended. I sat there being like, oh my, nothing. It took me way too long. It took me like a solid 5 minutes. Satire
works when you don't have to explain it. I think that's broadly a rule.
Yes. Oh, and I like this one. Number 9, if we could.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a little secret, young lady. Seek righteousness, not justification for your sin, for the devil is everywhere you look. I just love the young lady part. That's just, they think I'm young, and that makes me feel good about myself.
Right, that is nice. I'll take it. In all of these, I guess, ideas or commentary on our appearance, it's nice to have that piece of things.
You know, and I will say, a lot of people post in the chat that I look like a vampire, and I don't think that's supposed to be insulting. So if you think
in this post-Twilight world, I do feel like that's a compliment, right?
Right. I'm more surprised by how many people separately, unrelated to each other, say that I look like a vampire. So if you think I look like a vampire, post in the chat, call in, tell us about it.
Tell me about how young I look.
Yeah, please do. Tell me about how immortal and young I look. Let's see. Number 12, if we could.
This says, liberal weak man, or I'm sorry, number 12. Yeah. The liberal weak man's way of thinking. God made 2 genders, and whether you like it or not, he in his wisdom made one stronger than the other, but with great responsibility to protect and guide the other. I maybe am falling down on my duties here. I don't know that I'm stronger than most of the women that I know. This does feel like a problem if God has given me some responsibilities I may not be able to live up to. I'm not entirely sure that I myself could fight a fully grown bear on behalf of a woman should the internet call on me to.
Right. Well, and here's the thing that cracks me up so much about these like heavily misogynistic comments we get. I don't know what world they're living in, But apparently all of these misogynists are living in the woods with an axe, and like they act as though every day they have to go out with like a sword and a shield and defend their family. It's like,
just
dude,
defending women, just taking on that responsibility, armed in the full armor of God.
It's like, how many people attack you on your way to your Chevy Trax? I need to know, what neighborhood do you live in where you're just out there fighting for your life every day, and apparently for your women every single day. And I've noticed that also about products that are marketed in that very kind of red pill space. Like I saw a bar of soap the other day, literally just a bar of soap, but like it was a goat and he was like flexing so hard that his shirt was tearing off.
It's man soap for men.
Yeah, and the scent was called something, you know, like He-Man sperm or something like that. Probably not, but like it's literally just soap. Like it's just soap. It wasn't even made out of goat milk. It was just soap, and it was, I don't know why they do this.
I mean, do real men even use soap, Sydney? Like, I think that's really the problem at work here.
You're right. It's a trick. If you buy the soap, they know that you're just, I was about to say a word that I don't think I can say on here. That you're weak. I don't want to get us demonetized.
Yeah, fair enough.
Let's see. Number 4. Actually, you know what? We have a super chat that I want to make sure that I call out.
Sure.
Puck for $5. Hello, Sydney and Christy. Saw you were hosting, and I thought I'd say hello, Sydney and Christy. Hello, Puck. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Puck. We appreciate you.
Thanks to the super chat.
Yeah, how about this one from Miranda Rensberger, $5 saying, obviously, we all look young forever. That's why we eat babies. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. All right. So that's the secret. Is that how you've been making it work, Sydney?
That is eating babies and just never leaving the house. I just am a recluse. I just like, why SPF when you just never have to see the sun to begin with, you know?
Fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at number 14, if we could. Mm-hmm. 14. All right, guys, I'm going to keep it 100 with you. If you're ever in this situation again, let me give you a quick and easy way to know if you should be listening or leaving. If a dude's got a ponytail, something ain't right there. The best tip you will ever get in your life right there. And I'm not even kidding either. I feel like I should be reading this in a dramatic voice.
I really feel like it's more of a King of the Hill kind of voice situation. Like I'm reading this and I'm just thinking to myself, my experiences growing up in rural Texas, like it's not the first time somebody's implied that this boy ain't right.
Yeah. Keep this in mind as you move forward, because from this moment on, you weren't already privy to this revelation. You'll be able to avoid so many clusterfucks and uncomfortable situations. Seeing a man with a ponytail is the universal sign to get the hell out of whatever encounter you're in.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. If you are in the woods and you see both a bear and a man in a ponytail, I will let you make your decisions based on whatever you need to.
Well, and what's funny is that historically, some of the most successful warrior societies have had buns and ponytails and braids. So I don't know, maybe they just haven't watched Shogun yet or something. I'm not sure, but
I believe that is probably the more likely issue here, clearly.
Yeah, that's the interesting part, is it's actually quite the opposite. We have another super chat from Lightslinger42 for $1.99. I like my babies with ranch. Yep. All right. And I believe we have a call waiting in the queue.
Yeah. Let's talk to Puck in Ohio, who just dropped us that $5 hello. Puck, how are you doing?
Hello. Good to talk to you guys.
Yeah, glad to hear from you. What's on your mind?
So I was wondering what lessons we should be taking away from this man versus bear conversation that's been going around social media, since the topic is sexism.
Yes. So I actually just talked to somebody about this the other day. Do you mind if I weigh in first?
Yeah, please. And I suppose walk us through it in case there's anybody who is simultaneously someone who watches YouTube, but is not somebody who has managed to catch this debate. Yeah. I don't know what 4 or 5 people that might entail, but let's let them know what the hell we're talking about.
Yeah, somebody who just like took some NyQuil on Friday and has slept since then and just woke up and they don't know what's going on. Yeah. So this man versus bear debate, basically, I believe it started on TikTok. It could have started elsewhere, but it really blew up on TikTok. It's this question where where women are being asked if they are stuck in the woods, would they rather be stuck with a man or with a bear? And there is an overwhelming majority of women. In fact, I don't think I've seen a single woman say the man. They're all picking the bear. And this is exploding the internet for a multitude of reasons, but one of the reasons it's so controversial is because a lot of men are taking offense to the question and the answers, but I don't think they're actually looking into the nuance of the answers. And
Sure.
one of the first things that came to mind for me was, if you think it's about you, that should be a red flag. That I think that's the main takeaway.
If you're making the conversation about who you are as a person and how much trust you deserve, then you're totally missing out on the experience of a woman alone in the woods.
Right. Or if you hear of a woman telling her story about the idea of being afraid to be alone with a man and you automatically think she's talking about you, I feel like there's some introspection that needs to be done there. Why did you assume that you were the scary man she's talking about, right? So my brother, my dad, my husband, none of those people think that argument is about them. None of them have taken offense to that because it's not about them. They don't automatically assume that the scary man that's being talked about is them. It's scary men that are being talked about. And I think the main message that people are missing, whether they're missing it on purpose, whether they're missing it just entirely, is there are, as someone, I'm from Arkansas, I have literally been in the woods with a bear. This is coming from personal experience. When I see a bear, there is a 0% chance that that bear is going to be aggressive towards me because I look like their ex-girlfriend. Because I remind them of their mom, because they saw me at a bar and they tried to talk to me and I didn't talk to them. Bears have known motivations, right? It's food, it's sleep, it's mating. That's basically what you can assume a bear is after. Or you're too close to the bear cubs. Those are the reasons you might, on a rare instance, get attacked by bears. And if you look up the actual statistics of bear attacks, it's not that common. So I know when I see a bear, maybe there's a particular stance I need to get into. I know not to turn around and run. I know that I probably need to lay down flat on the ground, play dead, do what I got to do. You can approach a wild animal knowing that the primal instincts are all you have to worry about. With human men, it's not the same way. We read all the time about people who commit crimes because they just wanted to see what it felt like, or because the girlfriend broke up with them, or because the wife left them, or there was a story very recently where a gentleman killed his children to get back at his ex-wife. The motivations are so much broader, and the way to respond to them are so much more difficult to navigate, that's why so many women are saying, I would rather be stuck in the woods with a bear than with a man. They are not saying, I would rather be stuck in the woods with a bear than my husband. I would rather be stuck in the woods with a bear than my brother. They're saying, if it was between a strange man and a bear, I would pick the bear because at least I can somewhat predict the bear's motivations and what they're after. You're not going to get catcalled by a bear. You're not going to get groped by a bear. You're not going to get followed home by a bear unless it's hungry, right? And so I think what's going on, and something we can take away from this, is, especially if you're a man, don't take it so personal. It's not, the debate is not about you, about how you are horrible, how you are violent. If you're not one of those men, then you shouldn't be worried about it. Then the argument should not offend you. What you should be more concerned about is why every woman on the internet is having the same response and what you can do to help them feel safer in society.
Yeah, it's not a issue about an individual. It's an issue of reputation. It's the fact that not all men are bad people or whatever that means, but that all men exist in the category of manliness, and the category of manliness through the acts of a bunch of shitty men, and then maybe quote unquote good men who aren't doing enough to change it, have this reputation. And we all need to be a part of changing that reputation. If your role in changing the reputation of men is stopping assaulting women, then by all goddamn means, do that. For the vast majority of us, our role is in calling out, preventing, and doing things to stop those men from tarnishing the rest of our reputation.
Yes, absolutely. And I think something else that people need to keep in mind is this question is about statistics. This question is about the statistics that prove that the likelihood that there will be violence occurring in the woods in that moment is much higher when you are with a random stranger who is a man versus a bear. Like, you can't ignore statistics. You can't say that you're somebody who believes in science or supports statistics and reality, and then take a question like this and be upset about it because you didn't get the answer you wanted. If you're not getting the answer you want, if you want women to start saying they would prefer the man in the woods that day, what is it that we can do to make society a place where women will say, I don't mind being with a strange man in the woods?
Yeah, fair to say.
And that's actually where
Puck, please go ahead.
Well, see, that's where I was most curious about this is what is the next step? It's like, okay, we've asked the question, we've established a baseline. Where do we want to go? Because I've heard some people say, some women say that, on my Facebook feed, they say they don't want the answer to be, I would rather be with a bear. They don't want to be afraid of men.
Right.
But I don't see that like everywhere. So I don't know if that's a global goal. And of course, nobody's going to be able to speak for all women everywhere. But assuming that the goal is make men less scary, is that reasonable to state as what the goal of man versus bear should be going out of this?
I think,
or at the very least, just acknowledging where we're at as a society. I think it's more of a litmus test. I think that this question isn't necessarily about moving the needle, although good information and good data is how we understand where we're at in order to begin to move the needle. But I think it just serves as a litmus test, as a benchmark to say, oh no, as a society broadly, we're in a pretty bad place in terms of men's reputation. Is that reputation accurate? Well, yeah, kind of in a lot of ways. Is it really useful in any meaningful way, in my mind, to sit here and debate about what is more likely to happen out in the woods between this type of bear or this type of man? I honestly don't care. The mere fact that we are having a conversation where so many of us feel very clearly that it's not a clear answer or that there is any reason to choose the bear, which has been largely unchanged for millions of years, says to me that there's something about humanity or human culture that needs to change.
Yes, absolutely. And I think also something we can take away from this entire situation has less to do with the actual question and the actual content, and more to do with learning to ask why instead of getting offended. Say, for example, I got on TikTok today and there was maybe the same prompt going on that was like, would you rather be stuck in the woods with a woman or a bear? And 100% of the responses were men saying a bear, a bear, a bear. My first question would be, why? What's going on? What did I miss? What is it about men that makes every single one of them prefer the bear over the woman? My first instinct would not to be filming my own TikTok about how ludicrous it is, about how stupid it is, how I'm not one of the women they're afraid of, yada, yada, yada. I would be confused and I would be concerned and I would want to know what is going on and why they feel this way. And so I think even just like on a micro level, we can make a step in the right direction by encouraging people to ask that question as opposed to pick a side, as opposed to be offended, as opposed to, yeah, I agree with them, I disagree with them. Before we even get there, maybe we should ask why.
Yeah, again, it's not about whether or not the answer to the question is correct, although
Right.
I think you can make really compelling arguments, but rather what the fuck that we have to ask this question in the first damn place. That's what scares me. That's where I get concerned here.
Yes. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Well, you guys had great responses. It's beautiful, and in a way, I'm glad that the dialogue is happening. At the same time, I kind of wish it didn't have to. But right. I'm glad that there is talk about it, and I'm glad there is a path forward and that conversations are happening. And I think the conversations that are happening in the small spaces that we don't get to see, not the TikTok videos, but the ones where people are reaching out to their friends and their family and their wives and their girlfriends and their daughters and saying, okay, can you help me understand this? Those are the conversations that are important to happen. I'm glad that they are happening. And I've been hearing those conversations happening more often. I'm really glad to see that.
Yeah, agreed. 100%. 100%.
Yeah. Let's hope it means something. I would rather be having this conversation than whether a dress is, blue and gold or whatever else. But, if the internet can be harnessed for ridiculous silliness, and this is some part of that engine, then let's hope it can also be a mechanism for better understanding of the experiences of some 51% of our entire population, which very much has to live in fear of these types of concerns.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much for indulging my topic today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, appreciate you. Have a great weekend.
Yeah. And if anybody listening disagrees with anything we said or wanted to add to anything we said, give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions, because sexism is kind of the whole vibe today. That's what we're talking about. So let us know your thoughts on the topic as well.
Love to talk more. Sure.
Yeah. So I'm going to hit a super chat. And then if we got a voicemail, I'd love to run one of those as soon as we do the super chat. We got one.
Yeah, please.
So the most recent super chat that just rolled in is Sergius Maximus. $2, $2 Canadian. Man, bear, pig. I'm super ethereal, you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And then let's see here. Did we have a voicemail?
Yeah, let's go ahead and hit that if we can.
Well, hello. I was just in your live chat and I saw the number. I wanted to give it a call just to see if anyone answered, because I mean, I'd love to talk to you guys and actually have a conversation with some of you. Because, I mean, I'm not a theologian or anything, but I'm pretty sure that, I could solidly debate any of you and win. But beside the point. That's beside the point. Do you say God's immoral? You can say that. That's fine. I'd love to hear your actual argument for that, because I've never heard a good one. Every religion on the planet Earth has had morals that came from a higher power that you're supposed to follow. Now, whether you agree that those morals are right or wrong is beside the point. You could maybe say that they were made from our minds, or that we made it up because we wanted to control people, or whatever you want. That's fine. But either way, you still have to account for collective experience. And that's just a small little thing. But I know that you guys are the poison that is society, that is in our society, and you guys are bad. And I just wanted to call to just see how bad it is. It's pretty bad. And I'm glad that you guys are losing, and that the world is waking up to the reality of what this world really is.
You know what that was giving me the whole time?
Hit me.
I was getting flashbacks to my Bumble days when I wouldn't call somebody anymore, and then that's the voicemail you get, look, so here's the thing, and then 14 minutes of them just telling you how awful you are, and then being like, but anyway, I'm available Thursday if you are still interested after this.
Yeah, I love that this whole conversation was I could beat you in a debate, and I should definitely do that, and I'm going to proceed to do that now without you responding to anything that I say. He very much seemed to feel like we were responding, and that he just had the best comebacks throughout the whole thing. I have to kind of highlight the question of, how is it possible that every single religion on earth is getting its information from a higher power, including the ones that don't actually make reference to a higher power? But what is a higher power in the, you know what, never mind. Let's not worry about any of it. All religions are just and valid and totally make sense, even as they contradict themselves, let alone each other. But you and I, Sydney, you and I are the poison in our society with our ponytails and our short-haired females and whatever the hell else.
Yeah, I just realized that. I was like, oh, you've got the haircut I'm apparently supposed to have, and I've got the one you're apparently supposed to have. So we're just flipping the script on humanity right now. The liberal agenda is among us. You know why I think that guy thought he was having an actual debate is because I think in his real life debates, he doesn't let people get a word in edgewise. So he's used to there not being a second voice there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Got a couple super chats. Let's see. Super chat X million, $20. Dovetailing with chat earlier, my THTM submission was, the worst part of going to church as an atheist is that someone has to stay behind to make sure that dinner isn't ruined by the baby becoming overcooked. 100%.
It's a very real challenge.
Yes, it is. And then Triangle of Stars, £5.99. Thank you for that, Triangle of Stars. Thank you. Do we have another call in the
sure.
queue?
Let's talk to Nika in New York. Nika, what's on your mind today?
Hi. So I'm a female assigned at birth, cis, and I've recently come against some issues in my employment. I have a disability that's invisible, and I know that a lot of people who are trans also deal with a lot of issues that are invisible. Sometimes not, and that's sometimes a problem. But I want to try to get into a workforce where people are more accepting, and I feel like a lot of trans owned companies or charities and whatnot would be a less toxic place to work, but I'm nervous that I might be taking opportunities away from trans people, and I would never want to make being a trans person any harder than it is. So what's the appropriateness of that?
Oh, that's a great
so
question.
that feels very kind of broadly hypothetical to me. When you talk about the notion of like trans-owned businesses or trans spaces, I suppose I have to ask, is there a job that you're looking at applying for? Is there a environment? Because the notion of a trans space can be very vague and nebulous, and perhaps that is a book club of 6 women who are all trans who want to keep it that way. Perhaps it's a large organization with hundreds of employees that are searching for people who are not just trans identified, or maybe not. Like, there's so many different ways to define these terms that I would hate for you to get sort of lost contemplating your navel by just looking at the broader philosophies of it. Is that a fair framework for me to offer you here, Nika?
Yeah, definitely. I do appreciate that take, because I guess that's something that I didn't take into consideration in terms of looking. It really does matter the specifics of the place that I would be applying to. That's a good point.
Yeah. And something I might also add is, I don't know where you tend to look for jobs, but I tend to look for jobs on things like LinkedIn, websites that are made for job posting. And so if at the point where the job is available publicly, I don't necessarily think worrying about taking roles from trans people is necessarily an issue, because it sounds like they've opened their opportunities up to the public. Now, a lot of times when you read job descriptions, they'll give specifications on things they're looking for, like somebody with this experience, somebody with that experience, somebody who has nonprofit experience. And so there are other qualifications, I'm sure, that are required for those roles. But I might think, and this is coming from somebody who I have no experience being a trans person. I've been a woman assigned at birth. Since then, I've never questioned my gender, my sexuality. But I would think that at the point where I am able to see these opportunities because they're being offered to the public, it's not necessarily something that you're taking from anybody else. As long as your qualifications meet what they're looking for. Now, it's different if, say, for example, there is a trans job board, like maybe there's a website specifically to help trans individuals get roles in professional settings, or I know that there are a couple of places in, say, like the arts community where they want to make sure that trans individuals get to play trans roles in movies and on stage. That's different. I can see how trying to go for those exact same roles or jobs that are available on those forums specifically to help trans individuals get opportunities that may not always be accessible to them, unfortunately, because of people's biases. That might be a situation where you should be concerned about that, where you're like, I don't necessarily think this job board is meant for me, or this role is meant for me. But if you're applying for them in a public space where they're available for everyone, I don't think there's an issue with that at all. And I don't think that sounds like something you would be taking from a trans individual.
That's fair. I really appreciate your guys' perspective. I always just, as someone of, I guess, cis privilege, even though I am a woman and do have disabilities, I never want to overstep my bounds. I always want to try to protect people of that community. And I really appreciate your guys' perspective on it.
Yeah, I think when we go to a job interview, we're all trying to put our best foot forward. We're all trying to maybe massage our CV a little bit to make sure that we fit in appropriately. And perhaps in some of these quote unquote trans spaces, we should be even more mindful that we are presenting transparently, that we're being sincere in what we're offering, and not put too much of a veneer on those things. But also, it's a job market, and I think that that's a little bit to be expected too. So I suppose I would encourage you to trust in yourself to be a kind and generous human. don't force yourself through any doors that haven't been opened to you, but you also don't need to agonize or beat yourself up over taking advantage of an opportunity that's been presented to you.
Yeah.
I appreciate your care and concern here. I sincerely do. And I do want to acknowledge that neither Sydney nor I speak for the trans community or really are active members of that community. And as sincere and passionate allies, I would like to say that you are welcome to take any job that will take you.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day. Love the show.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks for calling.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have another call in the queue?
Yeah, let's talk to Rich in New York, who I think wants to carry on this bear question a little bit. And, you know, here we are on the internets. Let's do the internet thing. Rich, what you got for us?
Hey, first of all, I think being a vampire is probably the coolest thing ever. So if you really want, you've got it made. But that's just a joke. Really, the question about the bear thing, it seems like people don't understand that when people react at such large numbers to a survey question, you have to ask the question of, is the question a good question? But what is in our society that would trigger women reacting to it?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that's always lost in some of these things. Well, I'm not going to do that. I've never. Why are women feeling that way? I'm not a bear. I can't rip them apart with my claws. All these type of reactions to the points that both of you made is that the dangers that women feel every single day is what this is talking about. It's not talking about the bear. And I don't understand. People seem to miss that point. It goes over their head.
Yeah, I think Sydney did a great job of highlighting the fact that in some ways, even though a bear is a inscrutable wild animal, and we're not necessarily able to get inside their psychology in the same way we could a man, their motivations are still much more of a known quantity, and their behavior is therefore much more predictable. And you're unlikely to see, 98% of all bears would never assault a woman. It becomes like way less of a consideration in some ways. Right. I have never once seen a mugshot of a bear being passed around the neighborhood as an offender who's moved in, next door or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Never say never, but so far.
Another thing was, when was the last time you saw a bear just target women?
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah,
when a bear is rogue when a bear is rogue or something, a bear is rogue and he just wants to eat whatever. He feels threatened, or he's been trained or taught that humans taste good or whatever. He's just going for humans. I mean, he's never just looked at women and just targeted them. I just think people just seem to miss so many of these things that seem to be so simple. Well, I think it's based on who you are and what you see.
No, and you're hitting on the meat of it, just with that central question, suggesting that this is a question that needs to be asked, because it's not as if we are taking survey results so that our park rangers can go out and make determinations on who is and is not allowed to wander through the national parklands. It's about recognizing that there's a huge emotional reaction to the notion of men in our culture. And why is that reaction there? Well, we have hundreds of years of incredible academic literature, of culture and music and art and philosophy and dialogue to sift through. I'm not going to pretend to be able to sum up all of gender theory here, but this question does serve an interesting razor to kind of cut through all of that and just highlight the simple fact that women are scared of men. And that is a problem, full stop. I don't really give a shit about the safety metrics of bear encounters. I will say, not for nothing, but I actually told this story in my wedding vows, how proud and impressed I was when I met my wife to see that she was somebody who, when we encountered bears on the trail, had no problem just sort of looking around, making sure it was a safe situation, and then just powering forward. in a way that I know is very different from the way she walks into a convenience store when she is alone late at night.
Right. 100%.
And to your point, I think as men, we can empathize as much as we want, but we can't understand that. I remember, and I'm almost embarrassed by this. When it was a while ago, a long time ago. I was on a line, and a woman cut me off on the line in the grocery store, right? And I looked at her, and I just scowled at her for like 10 seconds, just looking at her because I was so pissed, right?
Sure.
And I watched the reaction, and her head dropped, and I didn't think anything. And I got in my car, and I realized what I did not have to do that, but as a young man reacting, not
Sure.
reacting to her as a woman, just reacting to her as a person cutting me off in that line. This power dynamic, and it hurt me so deeply. I wish I wanted to go back in there to try to just say I'm sorry, but I knew that it wasn't the thing to do. But we don't understand as men, and everything that we do, we need to question. And just some of I just don't think. And I just don't think we do the time. It's just like as a black man, I think it's the same thing with, people who don't understand our reactions. And I think for me as a black man, I've decided that, and years ago I had to decide that civil rights isn't black rights. It had to be civil rights for everybody. And I don't think we all take that time to do these things. We don't take our times to self-examine our reactions that we think are benign. And I think if we do this if we try to do this from just about every aspect of our life, we're better off. And I don't think many of us do that. We make that move, and we learn that thing.
Yeah.
Men need to recognize their privilege here. They need to recognize that their experience is different from most women's experiences. Sydney, please.
Well, yeah. And I was just going to say, also, I think there's the added confusion on my end of most of the responses we're seeing that have a problem with this conversation are responding with aggression. And you're like, why would you use, like, why would you use, even if it's just goofy social media aggression? I know that as a woman, we take all kinds of aggression as aggression. It doesn't matter if it's passive aggression. It doesn't, like, you've got to be careful because passive aggression can turn to real aggression very quickly. So you might think it's a funny TikTok that you're making, like sassing a woman who made a video about that, but it can also come across as very aggressive. And it's confusing to me how, in order to prove that that women should not be afraid of them, they respond aggressively. The men who I'm not afraid of really haven't had much of a take on the situation. Their take has been, wow, that's tough, or weird, how many people are upset about this or offended by this, or I didn't even know that topic was going around. Like my dad has no idea this topic is going around. But the people you don't have to worry about in those scenarios, the people who I would not trade for the bear, right, are not the people responding with aggression. It's the people who, for whatever reason, they hear this conversation and they take it offensively and they take it personally. And to that I say, what is the connection you're drawing between yourself and this woman saying she's afraid? And why did you draw that conclusion? And why did you feel offended by that? If a news story went out about a woman robbing a bank nearby, my first thought would not be, oh my God, they're going to think it's me. They're going to think it's me just because they said a woman. So why is it that so many men are taking this commentary and thinking this is about me? And that, I think, deserves much further introspection.
Yeah, no, I'm loving that even among our community, in our chat right now, there are men feeling like this is a conversation bashing men and talking about how like bears are these apex predators, ignoring the fact that men, like human men, are the dominant force on the planet, right? Like, if you feel like this conversation is bashing men, you're either missing this conversation or perhaps you're one of the men being bashed and you should examine that. Is that, am I too much?
Well, and there's a comment here that I actually would love to address in the chat. Puck asked, is there a way to respond with curiosity in such a way that could not be interpreted as aggression? Yes, there is. I think there's a huge difference between I'm stitching this TikTok because this dumb lady says this dumb thing. And girl, if you're afraid of it, there's so many like sarcastic and hot takes and, oh, like, what's the problem, ladies? Like, you've never been with a real man. Those are all the wrong response. The correct response would be, I'm curious. What's your take? What's your reasoning? What do you think she's talking about? Ladies in the audience, anybody who's ever experienced this, comment below and tell me why this would be such a thing. I'm very confused. There's a much different way to ask questions and get an answer than being like, why, huh? What's your problem? What's wrong with you? Why, huh? Like, are you just dumb? Are you a nerd? Are you ugly? Like, are you just miserable in your marriage or whatever? Genuinely asking a question, I don't think is ever a problem. In fact, I think it would be well received, but it's any phrase at all done in a specific tone or with a certain body language can be taken as aggressive or passive aggressive. And I think there is a huge difference, and most people can tell the difference between somebody who genuinely wants to know versus somebody who wants to start an argument or wants to debate. So yeah, always ask when you're curious. I think that's the best way to learn.
Yeah, it's a tough question, and in the end, when you are in a position of power, like men, when you are questioned, that doesn't. Why is it a threat to your power? Why do you think? Why is it a threat to you?
Right.
Is it that you realize that? And honestly, as a black man, I see the same reactions when it comes to race. These reactions are pretty consistent across the board on everything. It's like the predominant position feels like something's being taken away from them, whereas the reality is they have been taking things away so long. When people start telling them to stop taking things away, they get offended.
Yes. And you also said
and the
something.
reality is they've been the one that's. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
But I'm just saying, in the end, when you are in a position of preeminence, when people question you, no one's taking anything away. You have to question yourself, what have I been taking away from them for so long that they're questioning me? And this is what people don't get it. And I see it, like I said, and for me, especially in race relations, I see it because that's the thing that affects me the most. But I also see it in all types of communities, and it seems like these are the things that people seem to be missing, and I don't get it. And even within the black community, I call people on it when I see the misogyny and stuff. So it's any ism.
Yeah. Well, and you said something that I just kind of thought about a minute ago that I think is also really important to this conversation. A moment ago, when you were talking about that memory you have and how bad it makes you feel and how sad it makes you feel and how uncomfortable, I think there's a certain demographic of people who handle the discomfort in the wrong way. So you remember that and you think, oh, I should have handled that better. I regret that behavior. I'm going to be different in the future. And that's awesome. And that means I think that you've got a really high emotional intelligence. You've done a lot of introspection. You've done a lot of work on yourself. You've admitted when you change as an adult, as you grow up. You've probably gone through phases, it sounds like, as you've gotten older. And I think there's another group of people among us that's sadly a large part of the population that when they have a memory where they feel bad, they don't know how to process those feelings. So they immediately go, no, the other person was wrong. No, that lady shouldn't have been scared. She's the problem. I'm not the problem. I didn't do anything wrong. That lady shouldn't have been scared. It's her fault, because they don't like feeling uncomfortable, when instead they could use those uncomfortable feelings to learn and grow from and think, wow, that sucks. I hate feeling this. I'm never going to act that way again, even if I can't undo the past. There's another group of people who says, ew, gross, I hate this feeling. That lady shouldn't have made me feel this way. That lady shouldn't have been scared of me. I never did anything to her.
Yeah, the feeling becomes the problem, not the thing that elicited it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and people, even it's in every part of our life. There's no part of our lives that these things don't affect us. And I just think it's incumbent upon the individual. I don't like to use the word work because I don't to do the work. That seems so. I think that's something that people react bad to. I just think that we have to figure out how to make myself better as a human being, and make our community better. I remember I used to run a lot, and there were times when women would cross the street. And again, this is another thing I learned. I used to say, why are they crossing the street? I'm not going to do anything to them. But as I progressed through my, I just started saying, wow, she has to cross the street. And I never approached them, but it was my thought process that as I'm running down the street and I would see someone cross the street, I never would cross the street and just be an asshole, but it's these thought processes that you go through. And I don't know, I guess that word empathy, which is used so hard, so much, maybe it's overused, but that's the reality. It's a level of empathy that people have to figure out how to tap into. And it's not an easy thing to do.
No, not at all. Not at all. Excellent point.
So I appreciate you acknowledging your privilege here, Rich, and kind of walking us through that piece of it. I mean, something, power, something, great responsibility, right? Like we do have an obligation to recognize where we are in places of power over others, even if we didn't choose that power, even if we don't want that power. We have an obligation to wield it responsibly and to, ideally deconstruct the forces that granted us that control in the first place.
Yep. And it doesn't matter where you are in society and what level of society you're at. I can't say because I'm a black man, well, I'm not responsible for, what happens to women because I'm set upon all the time. Two different things.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to separate. And even as a woman, there are things that women have to separate. And I don't know what they have to separate. I don't know when they see the power they have. But everyone has power. I don't think anyone doesn't have power.
Sure,
over someone else.
Yes, situational for sure.
You have to be willing to see it. If you're not willing to see it, if you're always I'm a woman, or I'm a black man, or I'm handicapped, or whatever, so I'm not responsible. That's not true. You are. You are not excused.
Right use of power requires you to recognize the power that you have and to wield it responsibly, but you can't deny that it exists and still responsibly manage it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of people do that, and I think that's the next step in this iteration of equality, is that the people who are treated unequal to realize that they also have a responsibility and they have a power, and they have to figure out where that power is. And like you said, wield it responsibly. That sounds, but the reality is true. Mm-hmm. Even as a parent, anything, it doesn't matter. Big sister, big brother, whatever that power is, you have to figure out how to wield it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
100%. Thank you so much for calling. That was an excellent question.
Thank you.
Take care.
But before we go to the next call, I would like to just give a shout out to our top 5 patrons.
Please.
But what character or voice or inspiration should be used before I call out these patrons? I
don't know. You got a Grizzly Adams, bear fighting, kind of rough and tumble something in you. Maybe some West Virginia woods. What you got?
All right. Top 5 patrons. Dingleberry Jackson. Oops, all singularity. Devin Valjean. Kelveli Helveti. Left in the Leaves, an honorable mention, Jonathan Hull. Thank you, everyone who gives to us on Patreon. And if you want to have your name read on air, please consider supporting us at tiny.cc.patreon.th.
I was just transported to a cabin in the woods out next to a moonshine still. Thank you so much for that dramatic experience.
Thank you.
And now let's talk to Julia, New Mexico, if we can.
Perfect.
She's got some questions about being sexualized by men and about some of that use of power. Julie, tell us about it.
Hi, how are you doing? So I had a discussion with my best friend from high school the other day, and we're both pushing 60, so we have kids, and she has her 40-year-old daughter is actually my niece, and then she also has a 21-year-old daughter who is schizophrenic, right? And I don't really talk to them that much. I don't have a relationship, but the youngest daughter, she was telling me, my friend was telling me that all three of them went to, say, like a flea market, right? And Tori, the youngest, schizophrenic, she's very uncomfortable with men staring at her. You know, it bothers her a lot.
Right.
And she's young, she's pretty, you know, and her mother's reaction was, well, and the sisters was, well, look at what you're wearing. And I'm like, you did not tell her that. And she's like, well, I did. And I'm like, that's crazy, because that's not the problem. And so when my daughter was like, 16, and men would be staring at her, I would just stare at them, right? To get that, to, show my disapproval of them staring at my daughter, because it's, I know people are going to look at each other, but you don't have to make it so creepy, right? And so I just wanted to get your take on that part. And then also she said that her and my friend and my niece are trying to keep her from being too sexually active, even though she's in a relationship, because they want to find her a good guy that will take care of her. And if too many men have used her, nobody's going to want her. And they're telling her this. And I'm like, no, you're not.
Oh.
And it's so, I'm so hurt. Yeah, because my friend is not religious, but she's
really
conservative. And the niece is religious. And she even mentioned things like men think about sex more often than women. It's, and I'm just like so shocked. And I don't know how to.
The first thing I was going to ask you was, how religious are they? Because I was expecting you to say evangelical, fundamentalist. I'm shook to hear that this language comes from somebody who's not religious. That's just shocking. Yeah. And it's also so disappointing to care about people and to find out they feel this way or they react this way to certain situations. That's awful. Christy, did you have thoughts before I was going to dive in, but I would rather hear your thoughts first.
No. I mean, I feel like this is definitely a question that you're going to have more lived in experience towards. I want to recognize that it is never somebody's fault when somebody else is leering at them, regardless of what they're wearing. I do want to gently present that it could potentially be a solution. It's not the right solution. It's not the ideal one. The ideal one would be to live in a world where men are not going to treat women, particularly young women, in that way. But if the question is, how should these young women respond? What should they do about it? My answer is really whatever it is that they want to, whatever helps to make them feel safe. Because while this problem may not be their fault, in some ways it becomes their responsibility or their obligation. Certainly there are other forces of power that ought to be at work here if we get into all of the shoulds of our culture and our society. But I want to empower them to do whatever it is that they feel they need to do or want to do to either push back against some of that bullshit or to just simply have a felt sense of safety because of that bullshit. But please, Sydney, let me give it to you.
Well, I'll start with a question. Julie, your friend who talks to their daughter this way or responds in this way, are they typically pretty critical of their kids, even when they're trying for the best reasons? Are they typically a pretty critical person?
No, she's not. She's to me, she was, I'm kind of like a rebel without a cause. And so is she. And so she's not judgmental on her kid. And I don't understand, because she wasn't like that. She was pregnant at 15, that's my niece. And so I just don't understand. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think, and this is just my thoughts and perspectives, but just from what I've experienced growing up, I'm about to turn 33, is I feel like there are certain responses, especially from mothers of teenage girls and young 20-somethings. There's this weird period of time in between when women are prepubescent girls and when they're first becoming adults that I think a lot of moms struggle to make that transition as well, because we focus so much on puberty and what they're going through and this and that, the other, but we don't necessarily think about what the family members are going through with them at the same time. And so I've noticed that there's this awkward period in between like the late teens, early 20s, where, especially between mothers and daughters, they don't know how to protect their daughters. They recognize that they're having to let go a little bit more. They're having to let their daughters kind of out in the world a little bit more, especially it sounds like she's in a relationship and she's clearly sexually active. And they don't know how to deal with that feeling or that situation or no longer being in charge. And so part of them is like, I still need to protect my daughter from everything. And the other part of them is like, I don't know how far is too far. Nobody's ever given me the tools I need to transition myself into this period of time where my daughter is leaving my household. And some parents are like, hey, you're an adult, take care of yourself, be safe, call me if you need me. And other parents are like, I don't know how to handle the way this man is looking at her, but I feel like I need to have a response. I feel like I need to have an answer. I feel like I need to say something in this moment. This moment can't go by without me saying something. So the only thing I can think of is I can teach her not to dress that way. That's the only thing I can think of in that moment is maybe I can tell her not to wear skirts so short anymore. Maybe I can tell her not to present herself so loosely. And they just don't. A lot of times they just don't know what else to say. Now I'm not defending them. That doesn't make it right. I think it's disgusting to look at somebody who's being clearly objectified in a public space where they deserve to exist and say, well, if you weren't dressed that way, that man wouldn't look at you. Newsflash, lived in Chicago, I would be wrapped up to my eyeballs in scarves and I would still get catcalled. We're talking boots, scarves, gloves, coat. Like you cannot even tell if you can't see my eyeliner who is under that coat. And you still get nasty comments. You still get followed a block too far. You know, you still get, hey, what's that mouth do? Where are you going? And your mouth is covered in a scarf. There's no way. But I think it's a fear and a confusion. I think the same fear we were talking about in the man versus bear in the woods thing is the thoughts of a mom thinking, this man is gross. He's looking at my daughter. I don't know what to do. What if I weren't here right now? What if I weren't here in this moment seeing this? Do men look at her like this all the time? And then they spiral, they panic, they freak out, and they think, what's the one thing I can say to feel like I'm giving good advice, to feel like I'm saying something about the scenario? Oh, don't dress like that. Don't dress like that. Or what's the thing I can say to help my daughter find a man who will protect her in a world like this? Oh, don't be a slut. Like, don't sleep around with too many men or men won't want to marry you. Which is, again, terrible take. But when I was younger, I used to just be disgusted. I used to be like, this is the nastiest stuff that adults could ever say. How dare you? But as an adult, I've been trying to think about it from like a more nuanced perspective. And when do I say the worst takes I've ever got? When I'm freaking out, when I'm scared, when I feel out of control of the situation. That's usually when the worst takes come out of my mouth that I regret immediately or that I don't have a better response for. So I hope that where that's coming from is more out of a place of fear and worry for her daughter and concern for her daughter, and not thinking properly and thinking, what's the one piece of advice I can give her that she can take with her into the future when I'm not here to see these men leer at her? Oh, I know. Don't wear booty shorts. Don't sleep around. Don't present yourself like somebody who wants it, and these men will stop being gross, which could not be further from the truth.
Yeah, it's a fundamental.
Exactly.
Sure. I just wanted to say it's a fundamental maladaptive coping skill to respond to anxiety with control. And we call it maladaptive when we see it not really yielding healthful results. It makes sense that if you feel anxious about a vulnerable person being sexualized, objectified, and potentially harmed, that you would want to stop that. So you come in and try to control as many details of the situation as you possibly can. But when we lose our rationality, when we start to assume that by controlling our clothing or by demonizing all of sex, that we are somehow stopping the problem, really we're just making ourselves feel better, while still feeding into this hypervigilant, anxious loop. So I can have compassion and understanding for why, you know, mothers in particular might gravitate towards some of those philosophies and some of those ideas, but we call them maladaptive because they aren't working well. They're making the problem worse by making us feel as if our anxiety has to go in these directions, even if it's not truly serving us or doing anything to benefit the situation.
Right. And I would like to address something that's going on in the chat. There's a lot of comments from people saying, you can look, you're out in public. People are going to look at you if you're out in public. First of all, we all know what we're talking about. Grow up. Like, you know what we're talking about.
There's a difference
like,
between like being aware of the fact that you are viewing somebody and leering at them.
Right. And not surprisingly, a lot of these look like dudes that are saying it. That just based on the screen names and the things they're saying, I think these are dudes saying this. But we know, you know what we're talking about. We know what we're talking about. It's not the same thing. People are going to look all over the place with their eyeballs. I have gigantic eyeballs. When I accidentally zone out and stare at somebody, you can see it from across the room. But there is an absolute difference between a man who doesn't know that he's looking at you and a man who knows he's looking at you. And the same goes for women. I used to live in Chicago on the CTA, the train every day. There'd be some weirdo looking at me. It didn't matter what gender they were. They would just stare and make direct eye contact and usually try to sell you something or ask you for something or just be creepy. We all know there's a big difference. So if you're in the chat going, well, you're in public, you're going to be looked at, grow up. Go touch grass.
Exactly, because everyone looks. I even look, and I even have sexual thoughts about men, but I'm not looking at them, undressing them with my eyes. You know, we're more subtle, I suppose, but which they need to learn.
Yeah, or like sometimes you accidentally do a double take, and then you look away because you're like, there are times where I'm out in public and I see cleavage that is larger than any cleavage I've ever seen, and you do a double take, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I look away because I don't want to be a creep. Because I don't want to be a creep. I don't want to stare at somebody too long, you know? It's ridiculous. So I just wanted to address that because I saw a lot of comments going in there, and that's BS.
And I agree with you guys on where this talk is coming from for her, because I know the mom, she's worried, you know, Tori, I have never met her, but she, from what her mom says, she will never be able to make it on her own. Or because she says she's just nuts. And I know that's a terrible thing to say, but this is her words. And so I just know that she's going to have a hard time coping in the world as an individual. But
it also sounds like, continue. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it also sounds like her mom might struggle to articulate what she really means and what she really feels too at the same time.
Yeah, well, and I also think she's listening to my niece, who's very religious, right? Because this is like straight out of apologetics. That's the way I thought. It's like some of the biological stuff. And but I feel like she should be empowering her, teaching her self-defense, teaching her some type of way to resist or to repel the unwanted looks and stuff, because I trained my daughter. It was a joke, but I trained my daughter. She was my bitch in training, right? Because I didn't want her to not be able to speak up for herself, and that's how I trained her. And she came out awesome, but I just, with her schizophrenia and everything, I just feel she's so vulnerable, and I think she's putting too much shame on her and her body, and she needs to empower her and get her to the best place to be able to survive alone.
The safety concerns, I think, are being directed in the wrong direction.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you for calling. I appreciate your question and your topic. That was really interesting.
No problem. I have one comment on the bear. All I can say to any men is bears are predictable. Men are not. Even if you're a good guy, we don't know that right off the bat. So, you know, we cannot predict their behaviors.
Right.
We're going
100%.
by reputation. Yeah.
Yep.
Fair to say.
And statistics. Yep.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. You ready to talk to Purple in Nebraska?
Let's do it.
All right. I believe Purple had a question for you. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, I actually just had just seen the show was on and had just seen that Sydney was on. And I had actually been wanting to ask her this for a little while now. I think Sydney, I think you were on a
show of either Talk Heathen or AXP or whatever it was. And one of the callers had called in and basically said, hey, how do you guys cope with, I'm going to paraphrase because it was a while ago, but all of the stupidity from theist callers, I guess is maybe not exactly a fair paraphrase, but it's as close as I've got off the top of my head. And your response was something akin to, kind of, it doesn't bother me as much because I know that what they say doesn't affect me. And had even kind of gone so far as to say that it doesn't matter because it isn't going to change my mind. And I guess to me that smacked of intellectual dishonesty, but I didn't want to put that onto you without kind of being able to understand it a little bit more. Because to me, it doesn't sound much different than the Christians that are, or not just Christians, but, people of all stripes who are just like, this is my thought and I can't be convinced otherwise. So I guess it strikes me as odd.
So what I think you might be referring to is, so outside of here, I'm also a debate coach. So I spend a lot of time coaching people on how to debate effectively, how to debate realistically, not including like tournaments and things like that. There's types of debate and styles, just general real world debate. And if that's the conversation I'm recalling, which I'm pretty sure that I remember this, it would have been back in January or February. What I was talking about was people who technically call in to these types of shows are not usually in the market of having their mind changed. A lot of times they have a question that they want to get answered, or they have a topic that they want to get addressed. But the likelihood that you will change somebody's mind, if they're a theist and I'm not a theist, there's a lot of other more minute, smaller topics that people change their minds on all the time. But the likelihood that somebody is going to call this number today and no longer be a Christian by the time they hang up is very slim, whether it's because of what we're talking about, whether it's because somebody's attitude, mine or theirs, whether it's because whatever reason, maybe time constraints. And I'm very comfortable in my beliefs. And I say this all the time. I say it on my podcast. I say it on this channel. I say it on podcasts that I'm on that belong to other people. True belief is when in my opinion, is when you've done all the research that you have ever considered doing. You've done all the research, you've read, you've listened, you've subscribed, you've asked questions, you've asked Jeeves. And at the end of the day, despite whatever you found, you're like, you know what? At the end of the day, I still believe this, whether you're a theist, whether you're an atheist. And I've done enough research, be it through debate, be it through my own questions, be it through interviewing guests on my own podcast. I've never seen the evidence that I need to see in order to change my mind and become a theist. Now, that doesn't mean, and I'm on the record saying this, you can check multiple interviews that I've done. I'm never saying never in terms of the evidence will never present itself. I've never said that. In fact, I've said multiple times, if tomorrow we wake up and science is like, oh shit, everybody, turns out God's been real the whole time. Well, then I'll believe in God. I'll have a lot of questions. I'll have a whole lot of questions to ask him. But it's not, I think what's being misconstrued as the inability to ever change my mind is it might have been a conversation about what people say to me on the internet, what people say to me in these phone calls, what people call me, what people insinuate about me will not affect me when I hang up because I'm resolute in my beliefs and I have the evidence that I need to feel comfortable in my beliefs. And I feel like I've read enough and researched enough and dug enough and dug deep enough into my belief system to have what I consider complete faith in my beliefs. Does not mean I will never be swayed. Does not mean that I am incapable of changing my mind. It does not mean that I refuse to change my mind. And I've never been on record saying that I will never change my mind. But in the conversations that we have in a lot of these live streaming shows, what ends up happening is the conversation is not held by two people who are in the mood or in the market to change their beliefs. It is usually somebody who is resolute in their beliefs calling me who is resolute in the opposite beliefs as theirs to have a conversation and hopefully answer some questions. But empirically, I have never been in a situation where I've interviewed somebody or talked to somebody or had a call from somebody where either one of us changed our beliefs by the end of that call. I have changed my opinion on topics. I've changed my opinion on certain political things that I used to think that I believed, on certain social ideas. And again, this is all across the internet. You can find the videos all over the place. I talk about ad nauseum about the number of times I've changed my thoughts and opinions and answers to things based on something somebody said during an episode of a show that I was a part of or on. But I've never let it bother me what people say about me during calls, because again, people call in and insult all the time, because I am resolute in my beliefs, and they've never said anything that has changed my mind, and I've never said anything that has changed their mind. And if that's the conversation I'm recalling, that's what that was about. That's what that comment was about. What are your thoughts?
No, yeah, and you're right about the time frame. So I think you are remembering the conversation correctly, and that's kind of the clarification that I was interested in and kind of expecting to get, because that's kind of what I figured. I wasn't trying to kind of assume ill intent. It struck me weird.
Do you mind if I compliment you really quick? But before we move on, I would like to compliment you really quick. I appreciate you asking that question, because I also think, whether it's because of debate, whether it's because of being on podcast, I also think that anything I say, I should be required to defend should somebody ask. So I just wanted to say, I'm really glad that you called in with that question and you held me accountable to the words that I said in the past, because I think that's important, and I think you presented it in a great way.
No, I appreciate that. Absolutely. And I think like the biggest probably reason that it kind of struck me the way that it did was just because I think it was, in my case at least, I tend to kind of hedge almost everything that I say. I have, my natural tendency has always been to be very confident, possibly bordering on arrogant. And so my kind of own personal journey has been to rein that in. And so for me, whenever I hear someone speaking confidently, because it's something I specifically deal with, I do also try to make sure that I'm not, causing, that I'm not falling back into that, if that makes sense. So, I always tend to hedge. And for me, it's always a matter of saying, no, I'm not convinced. And frankly, not only do I not know what would convince me, I can't even think of anything that would, but I don't know what I don't know. So it's always a possibility, but it's kind of a hypothetical. It's like not a hypothetical, theoretical possibility. Rather than maybe a functional one.
Totally.
Yeah, I think this again comes back to sort of a right use of power conversation. I mean, the truth is, like, am I open to having my mind changed? Yes, I am. But also, I've been doing this for like more than 5 years now, and it just keeps not happening week by week. And I know I can be kind of incredulous and like ask God to go ahead and interrupt this broadcast right now. Nope, still not doing it. And I know that kind of statement can make it seem like, we're just completely set in our ways and completely unwilling to change. Myself, I think half the people on this network have had meaningful transformations in their faith journey and have come to radically different ideas. Simply in the 5 years that I've been doing this kind of work, I know I've changed my opinions on a number of different topics, but it would also seem really insincere to show up every week and be like, any minute now I could change every belief that I had. Like it wouldn't be honest. And I think that there's something irresponsible about acting as if these conversations in a sort of singular light bulb moment are going to change lives. But what I do believe sincerely, and the reason I keep showing up and spending my time here, is that week after week after week, people will present ideas, perhaps in ways that are laughable and easily able to be completely deconstructed, or perhaps in ways that are a little bit more sophisticated and that are worthy of some time and attention. And by taking the time to methodically parse all of that out, everybody involved, everybody on either end of the conversation, and frankly, most importantly, the thousands of people watching these conversations are going to have a more sophisticated, more nuanced understanding of one another and of these ideas. And ultimately, that's the goal.
Yes.
You know, the existence of the ACA is not so that we can incrementally 5 calls at a time try and transform the worldview. It's so that we can expose these ideas and try to understand them and try to understand where they do and likely don't make any good goddamn sense.
Yeah. And something else, Purple,
Gotcha.
that might be helpful as somebody who's been working really hard on not sounding too confident when I speak, because on a regular basis I have to say, by the way, that sounded like I knew what I was talking about, but I don't know shit about what I'm talking about. I'm just guessing. It helps if you're also just as confident admitting when you're wrong. So like I might say something with the confidence of somebody who thinks I know everything, but when somebody calls me out and they prove me wrong, I go, my bad. I'm sorry. Thanks for teaching me that. I would have been walking around spewing some dumb bullshit, this whole time. So it might help you by balancing out. It's like, I can't help how confident I sound. And I think it's great, Purple, that you sound confident, but maybe you can balance that out with also confidently announcing when you're wrong, being proud of moments that you learn things, and being open about it as opposed to secretive about the times you're wrong, but boastful about the times you're right.
Yeah, no, and at the risk of possibly sounding a little bit on the arrogant side, I do try to do that for sure, and I would like to think it's something I've also improved, but there's always room for improvement in it. Yeah. And something that I thought was really interesting in what you said as well, Christy, that I have never thought about before, at least not in that context, is that basically, it's almost better to make it more clear that, this is kind of how I interpreted what you said. So if I got it wrong, let me know. But basically, it's maybe even better to make it more clear when you are only kind of theoretically swayable, rather than making it seem like a genuine option every day, when it's not, can actually come across as more maybe almost more dishonest. And I thought, that's just because to me, I try to put both of those. I try to say, well, it's probably not likely. It's very much in the same realm of likelihood that anyone's ever going to be able to convince me, that, I don't know, that pixies live in space, but that there's always the kind of, lack of 100% certainty.
Yeah,
so I need
it
to
can't
leave
be
that
fully
option on the
ruled
table.
out.
I tend to focus on the second part and not as much the first part.
But, one thing I can, if I'm being sincere, realistically rule out is that I'm not going to have some gigantic on-camera transformation. I did go from somebody who passionately, fervently dedicated my life to Christ and believed in him, and then I stopped being that. But it wasn't something that happened in a single night. It wasn't something that happened because of a singular comment. It was something that I wrestled with and, quite frankly, told no one about for an entire year. Even then, it was years and years after that before I started to admit it to the people around me and then to come out as an atheist. And I'm not suggesting that that's the model, and I'm not suggesting that a single call with proof of God could not change my mind in meaningful ways, but it would just feel absolutely insincere to try and dangle this bait in front of theist callers that if they have just the right argument that I'm going to transform my life and give up my career, because that's just not the way people think. It's not the way we understand psychology and the trans-theoretical model of change. If you're not familiar with TTM, I think that can really expand this debate. It's just not realistic to think that people are going to have those sort of on-camera transformations. And it would be insincere of me to try and dangle that carrot in front of somebody.
Yeah. But man, would we get enough calls, man. Get so many.
What was you had mentioned trans-theoretical, was it trans-theoretical model of what?
The trans-theoretical model of change, it's just one theory that helps to explain and understand the process by which humans change their mind or change their behaviors. It's a fairly common Psych 101 type theory. It's one that I don't want to really get into trying to explain here, but it just acknowledges that there are multiple stages that people tend to go through in a very nonlinear fashion when they're trying to, change any sort of meaningful habit, whether that's breaking free of addiction or transforming their cosmology of the world. It does tend to happen in these sort of predictable stages and processes. And it's worthwhile to try and understand those processes rather than just demanding that people be presented with a fact and then allow it to transform their lives. That's just not how human psychology tends to work out.
Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I wasn't expecting you to maybe, to go into all of that. I just wanted to make sure I could write it down so I could look it up later. So no, I definitely appreciate that. I hadn't considered that perspective, that kind of overemphasizing the theoretical possibility could almost be that kind of dangling carrot, as you had, I think, so eloquently put it. And also, I appreciate you as well, Sydney, in kind of not only clarifying, the statement that you had made, and taking that, I think, hopefully well-placed or well-phrased criticism, and kind of putting it to rest. And I very much appreciate that. It sounds like a lot of it was just, we're saying very similar things, it feels like, which is where theoretically could it happen? Yeah. Is it going to happen? Almost certainly not. But that doesn't mean it isn't a possibility. And it doesn't mean that, if I went through enough kind of thought processes, if there was enough kind of, deconstruction of my atheism or whatever, that it couldn't theoretically happen. Now, obviously, that, again, is unlikely. But no, I appreciate both of you. I appreciate being able to look into a whole new psychology thing. That's super fun. Because I don't always find new stuff on my own with the content silos the way they are sometimes. I know a whole lot about the ones I've looked up, but the ones I haven't looked up, it doesn't want to show them to me for some reason, because that's how algorithms work. But I do really appreciate it, though.
Yeah.
We very much appreciate your call.
Yeah, it makes me wish that we had the opportunity to have more conversations about past conversations and to clarify and deep dive a little bit more into and further explain. So thank you.
Yeah, I was just
all right. Oh, apologies there. Let me hit 2 super chats really quickly, and then I think we've got one more call we can wrap up with today.
Perfect.
Excellent. Okay, so we've got William Blanken, who offers $5 for saying, for any atheist who doesn't understand the bear response, would you rather run into a bear in the woods or a Catholic priest? That's a wrinkle on the debate. Maybe is worth considering. Lightslinger 42 offers $1.99 saying, I like my babies with ranch. Fair enough. And then finally, Puck Thoyander offers 50 Swedish krona saying, straight men know the difference in looking and looking because they wouldn't accept a man looking at them in that way. And I will tell you that, when I started to become more comfortable with my sexuality, when I started to sort of allow myself to embrace some of these pieces of myself that I had very much kept away through my fundamentalism, that I did become aware of being sexualized by men in ways that were definitely challenging. I mean, it is a experience that the vast majority of men never have to go through. And it can be a little bit eye-opening to what it is really like to exist as a woman in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I, as a able-bodied cis-ish male, really feel my privilege here, but I'll fully acknowledge that it doesn't feel good when a man tries to, undress you with his eyes. So to all of the men listening, listen to the women in your life. Please don't do it because I told you to, because somehow that's a problem also. But if I can just be one more voice in the crowd. But one more voice. Let's talk to Al in West Virginia if we can. Al, tell us what's on your mind today.
Well, I was wondering what you guys think about near-death experiences.
In terms of what?
Yes, such a broad question.
Well, I guess, it's been on my mind because, I'm an older guy. I'm 72. Mm-hmm. One of my best friends is suffering from pancreatic cancer and is expected to die any day. I've buried 2 wives. Another best friend died recently of a heart attack. And I guess I've been looking into it more, and I never really put a lot of thought into it. But I kind of had a near-death experience about 10 years ago of my own, not to the extent that, other people talk about the light and the tunnel and all that and the life review. All I had was just, I started choking on something and I blacked out. Oh. And what I had was just like a sense of peace. I don't know. It was just, which may just be, preparing myself to just go into nothingness. I don't know. But anyway, so I've been watching different YouTube videos, and I found this one guy who is a doctor, and he's a radiologist, an oncologist, and he has studied over 4,000 near-death experiences. And with the data that he has, it shows that there might be something to it. And I was just wondering what your thoughts as atheists were.
I don't want to be incredulous about it, but I'd like to ask where his data is published, right? Like what peer-reviewed journal collated and went through his research to suggest anything. Setting that notion aside, I'll say very briefly that a near-death experience, almost by definition, is something that you experience in consciousness as your brain is not functioning at its most optimal. And brains are weird and they do weird things. And I think that explains the vast majority of these experiences, even if we're not always able to run them to ground. But Sydney, I interrupted you. Please jump in here.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, you said he found there may be something to it. Something to what specifically? What was it that he found?
Well, just that there are people that experience near-death experiences that, life could continue to go on. Now, as for your comments about the peer review and things like that, I don't know because I haven't deep dived enough in that. And I'm actually a journalist. I've been 55 years come September 1st in radio, so I know how to do my homework. But I do know that the University of Virginia had a similar program that has a lot of documentation to it. I can't remember the other question.
Oh, no, it's okay. So I think that one, near-death experiences are probably quite different from person to person. I've actually had quite a few, and I'm in school right now getting my master's in writing, and I just wrote a short story about the number of times I've almost died. And I, like you, typically experience that sense of peace. And I think a part of that peace comes from the fact that I am an atheist and I don't think there's anything coming for me and I'm not worried about hell anymore. Part of that peace, I think, comes from whatever's happening, whether it's like a lack of oxygen or something like that. But I also think that your brain will do whatever it has to do or whatever it thinks it needs to do to keep you alive. And sometimes that involves just neurons firing like crazy because they can tell something's going on. And typically, from what I understand, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, our bodies very rarely want us to die. And so even when the person might be emotionally settled with the idea that they're going to die, maybe they have a terminal illness, maybe they're in a dangerous situation they just recognize they can't get out of, your body is doing whatever it's got to do to keep that consciousness going, to keep you thinking, to keep you trying, to keep you on your toes. And I think after a certain point, that just becomes illusions and light and thoughts and just kind of like dreams. You know how dreams can just come from wherever, and a lot of people have similar dreams and a lot of people have totally different, weird, distinct dreams. So I personally, obviously I have a problem with near-death experiences. Like I never want to experience another one, right? But I think a lot of the way that people experience and respond to those have to do with factors that are so I don't want to say convoluted, that are so innumerate. Are they stressed when it's happening? Are they at the best point in their life when it's happening? Have they been having a terrible entire year up until the moment it's happening? Are they on drugs when it happens? Are they not on? Were they expecting it? Were they not? Did they have a moment of preparation because of a long-term illness, or did it happen in the blink of an eye in an accident? There are so many intricate parts, I think, that I would imagine go into these near-death experiences that it would surprise me to find out that this can be measured scientifically. And that's kind of where I think I agree with Christy in that I would be curious to see where this person, and I know you said you don't remember off the top of your head, and I don't think you should have to, but I would be curious to see where this person gets their data, because to me, there are so many factors that go into these experiences. I just don't see a feasible way that we can possibly measure that as a measurement of any kind.
In at least one interview I saw with him is that they even had people that were absolutely no brain activity at all. They were on machines. You know, he's a doctor, he's a radiologist, he deals with death every day. And I don't know. He has a research foundation, NDERF.com, and you know, you can look it up yourself, I guess, and look more into it. I don't know. It does seem, of course, again, I'm an older gentleman, so I'm closer to that point than you guys are. But you know, it does seem to be you know, a peaceful state of mind. And I've never believed in hell. I mean, that's why I stopped being a Christian 50 years ago. I looked that up, and first of all, hell isn't hell anyway. It was a garbage pit outside of Jerusalem, and modern day Americans don't realize that there was something valuable that came out of that, and that was the fertilizer for the fields for new growth. You know, so you know, when Jesus talked about hell, the term was Gehenna in the New Testament, and it was a garbage pit, you know. But anyway, well, thank you, you know, for taking my call. And you know, I don't know. I just found it interesting. I'd like to, and I thought I'd get your take on it.
Yeah, and I think that would be interesting to poll people too, to just be out on the street and ask people, hey, have you ever had a near-death experience? What was it like? Give me like a brief rundown. Did you see lights? Did you not? What were your thoughts? I would love to have that conversation with people. I just think from a scientific angle, I would be curious how they could measure that exactly.
Well, and even as we do start to kind of code the commonalities in these experiences, I think you could get very similar data by asking people about their dreams, by asking people about their drug experiences. And certainly you will hear people who try to bring in these sort of supernatural elements to try and explain these things. The truth is, our brains are meaning-making machines. So especially when something has been sort of broken or taken offline or has been damaged in some way, we're going to get a very strange flow of data, and we're going to try to form a narrative. We're going to try to create a story out of it one way or another. And it's, I think it's just dangerous to be careless in the narratives that we actually accept here.
Yeah. And I just thought this was interesting. I looked it up, and they have the Near Death Experience Research Foundation. They also, the same group has the After Death Communication Research Foundation. And then they also have the Out of Body Experience Research Foundation. I thought that was interesting.
Oh, okay. I've never really looked them up, to be honest with you. My sister did when I told her about it. But I'm not on the internet all that much. I use YouTube a lot, but it's smart TV. So
sure.
Yeah. Well, thanks for calling. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Interesting. Very interesting thoughts. Have you, Christy, ever had a near-death experience?
I have not had a near-death experience. I've had a lifelong battle with nightmares and complicated dreams, as well as some professional and personal experiences with some mind-altering substances. And I've definitely seen some wild things that I lack the scientific training or the relevant data to be able to fully comprehend, to fully understand. None of it gets me to the supernatural, but it can create incredible experiences of awe. It can create incredible mental connections and associations. And I think there's value in exploring those things in rational ways.
Yes.
But our rationality needs to come along with us on that journey as well.
Yes.
Just because it has to do with death, just because it has to do with maybe some of the wishful thinking that we have of wanting to be able to connect with another universe, with some higher power, with some greater form of intelligence or consciousness, those desires are going to often direct us in the wrong way. And almost by definition, these types of experiences are things that sort of refuse to be subjected to scientific measurement. And so we need to be super mindful about the assumptions we're willing to make.
Yes, and there's that whole angle where no matter what you're looking for, you can find somebody who agrees, and you just want to make sure that you're not only looking for what you want to find, you're looking for what really exists out there and what data actually supports. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, friends in the chat, friends here on YouTube watching us, friends in the future watching this after it's gone live, I want to thank you for being here. And don't forget to become a channel member. You can click the join button below the video. You'll get custom chat emotes, early access to clips and shorts, and you will help perpetuate the mission of Talk Heathen and the atheist community of Austin. We would love to see you on here on our YouTube page. We'd love to see you in the chat. Don't forget to comment the question of the week for next week. You don't want to post it in the live chat. I forgot to mention that earlier because they don't really see it. But if you comment, the question was, or the prompt was, create your own God paradox. So don't forget to do that. Like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, ring that little bell. And now it's time for the love rings.
One more person who did take advantage of that opportunity to contribute.
Yes.
A super chat from Julie Cordova. Let's hit her with some love rings. $4.99 stating, I'm an atheist and a vegan. Therefore, I can't be eating any babies. My vegan option is baby carrots with vegan ranch. Good health tip for us all as we go out the door.
You think you're better than me, Julie?
Love to all of our callers and so many others.
Julie thinks she's better than me, and I resent that. So that's fine. I'll just go eat baby carrots and cry. But if you don't believe, this is your community, and we appreciate you being here. But if you do believe, we don't hate you. We're just not convinced.
We're just not convinced.
Oh, dang it, I messed that up. Gah, dadgummit.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.